Welcome back, everybody, to the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod. This week, we cover Trump's AI action plan for America, the NASDAQ and S&P soaring to record highs. President Trump signed the Genius Act to regulate stablecoins. We are seeing crypto-backed loans. It's about time, and much more. Remember to follow me on X at MorganSternNJ. Follow the pod on Rumble, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Zach, let's dive in. Where should we start?
All right. Well, let's recap Crypto Week, because when we recorded last week's episode, it was to lift the curtain a little bit. We recorded that on a Thursday morning, and all of the drama was still, things were still up in the air. There was all the drama with the procedural votes. But eventually, even though there were some hiccups, all three of those bills ultimately passed. The Clarity Act, which is the market structure bill, passed 294 to 134 with 78 Democrats supporting. The Genius Act, which is the stablecoin bill, that passed 308 to 122 with 102 Democrats supporting. And then President Trump signed that bill last Friday. This was funny, noting that when he signed it, he was signing it with a real pen and not an auto pen, which elicited some chuckles from the lawmakers in attendance, not always known for their sense of humor. And then finally, the anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act passed 219 to 210 with 2 Democrats supporting it. So all of that stuff, all of that drama, Brian, what are your thoughts ultimately on how Crypto Week panned out?
Well, it was hugely successful. And I love the coverage. I was watching the news coming out of it, and some of it was still like, well, that went terrible, and it was such bad signals because there was so much drama or whatever. They passed 3 bills on a bipartisan basis on a single day. Like, that's a very good outcome, and had a presidential bill signing within 24 hours. I have great sympathy for the White House staff in pulling that together, and the Secret Service on screening everybody, getting them in to the East Room. Pulling off something like that is no easy feat. But more broadly, look, the benchmark for bipartisanship and passing bills is it's changed in the right direction. We saw with repealing the broker rule from the IRS. We saw with the FIT 21, the last version of market structure. We were looking at, I think, 70 or 71 Democrats in the House. 60 votes or thereabouts, or a little more than 60 in the Senate for some of these measures. And so, and then the concern was getting back to that number. Well, it turns out we didn't get back to that number. We blew through that number. And now we have a much more broad bipartisan coalition. And that's wonderful, because whatever our voter registrations may be, I don't want the success of our business and our industry and our country to depend on who wins the next election. I want this to be broad-based prosperity. This is about American values, not Republican values or Democrat values. This is about how to help the country succeed. So seeing this broad coalition come together on these bills is incredibly encouraging. This is fantastic news for the country, and we're making great progress. I think we all want to see things move faster, but Crypto Week in the House, credit to Speaker Johnson, President Trump, Whip Emmer, Chairman Hill, Chairman Steil, all the Warren Davidson, some of the leaders on these issues really did an incredible amount of work to get this across the finish line. So amazing optimism is, that's how I'm feeling. I usually have cautious optimism. Now I have aggressive optimism. Just one finer point. So Clarity Act and market structure now goes to the Senate. That is going to be no easy process, but I think after the recess in September, they're going to hit the ground running on that. On Genius, the stablecoin bill, I think people had often thought of that as the low-hanging fruit. It kind of turned out that way, with over 100 Democrats supporting it in the House, and that really sailed through. On the CBDC bill, I think there still is a gap between where the Republicans are and the Democrats are. That's why you saw only 2 Democrats come on board. I think there's going to be more to come in the future, because the data that we have on this shows that this is not just a Republican issue. It's not just a libertarian issue or a conservative issue where people are concerned about a surveillance state. There are many on the left that don't want the government to decide how they can spend their money or track their transactions. I don't think that our friends on the left would be super psyched about President Trump determining, that they shouldn't invest in whatever, whatever product or service you can think of that is typically more aligned with the left. So this really does cut both ways. It is about constraining the government's ability to surveil us and control us. And so I think that's not yet bipartisan enough, but my hope is that it will be soon. Overall, great success. Crypto Week was unbelievable.
It was, and it's. I think we tried to allude to this last week, but it's very easy for folks like us that are so in this, this echo chamber. I'm at least 1,000 miles away from DC, so I'm slightly outside of the echo chamber. But we watch these things, and we have 9-hour votes and 8-hour speeches and all this stuff, and it's very easy to say, man, this didn't go as planned. And it's you step back and think of that perspective. It was fantastic. It's a testament to all of those folks that you mentioned, leading on this issue, getting those bills through, as you said, the president signing something so quickly. And we had some, calls early last week with folks that are more in the loop with Hill Democrats who thought that maybe 40 or 50 Democrats would support it, and you had 78 on market structure. So it'll be interesting to see. You had the kind of Maxine Waters crowd that was parroting all of that stuff. That seems to not have been very effective. So overall, great week for Crypto Week. Transitioning then over to something you mentioned at the outset, the White House released its comprehensive AI action plan on Wednesday. It was responsive to some of the president's earlier executive orders. The plan, it identifies over 90 policy actions that the federal government could take on what they called 3 pillars, which were accelerating innovation, building American AI infrastructure, and leading in international diplomacy and security. So those are the kind of going to be the focus for the administration in the coming weeks and months. So, Brian, what is it? I know it's new; it just came out yesterday. But what are some of your initial thoughts or reaction to this new action plan?
Well, the part about exporting American AI and making the world rely on the American tech stack because we're more advanced than in this space than others, I think is brilliant, because if you consider the fact that AI is going to determine how the entire world consumes information, you want American values, freedom, individual empowerment to underlie this technology, because it is going to be a part of our everyday lives. So I think that is really a brilliant notion that I think David Sachs has been championing for a while on how you continue to accelerate and build in America. That is where we get into permitting reform. That's where we get into tariffs and incentivizing American manufacturing. That's going to be a thorny issue because there's a lot of state and local regulation that needs to be dealt with there. And we've heard a lot about, siting, permitting, electrical grid regulation and supply demand management, frequency issues. So that's going to be a little thorny, but I'm glad the executive branch is focused on it. There's a number of different offices that are focused on it and how to smooth out the road for really building more here. I think the free speech component is I'm glad to see them talking about that. And just probably the most prominent example, or one of the most prominent examples, was the initial Google Gemini, where you had Black George Washington and stuff like that, where it was like woke AI, and it wasn't focused on accuracy or unbiased information. It was, or just fact-based. It was really just incepted with this ideological bias. I think enforcing that or coming at it from a government policy perspective is going to be really difficult because, as we found, one man's truth is another man's conspiracy theory, or sometimes the difference between conspiracy theories and the truth is about 6 months. So that one, just in terms of practical, legal steps they can take, is probably the hardest component of the, or I don't know if it's the hardest. It's hard, especially with the First Amendment to the Constitution. The actual building piece is also challenging because there's a lot of state and local regulation that needs to be worked out. But I think great principles, very clearly organized approach, and this new drive towards, to accelerate, to get America to benefit from this technology rather than focusing only on the risks. That's the right approach. And JD Vance spoke well at the event about that, about how our European friends have been so terrified of the risks. And the Biden administration was so terrified on the risks that they were really just creating a vacuum for China or others to fill to move faster. So we need to push the gas pedal down. And the great thing about a democracy or a democratic republic like America is that it can be self-correcting. So if we floor the gas pedal and we develop and we win this race and we're exporting the AI tech stack from America to the rest of the world, our values are going to underpin it. And then if we need to make changes or fix things, we will, because our politicians still need our donations and our votes in order to keep their jobs. And so as those things come up and people have concerns or we need to fix things, we'll fix them. But now is the time to slam that gas pedal down. And I think this report takes that approach. So I really like it a lot.
That's great, and there's a lot of good things in there, and it's a thoughtful. You can tell that they put some work into it, and they've got some great folks in the administration that think about this very well, and I think are responsive to what they're hearing from others. What do you think is the impact of this type of policy or this type of approach on AI companies, both large and small? Because you've got the Google and Gemini and OpenAI, but what about even small companies like Riot that are transitioning into this AI space?
Well, I think it's going to pave the way for more investment and opportunity. And the president doesn't just have legal authority; he also has cultural and convening authority. And you saw that play out at the Pennsylvania event that we highlighted last week, where he brought together power companies, tech companies, and everything in between to talk about $90 billion of business growth that's going to happen in Pennsylvania due to these industries coming together to advance this administration priority. And that's going to benefit Riot and others in the space, because now we have everybody racing against each other to create the next big event, the next big investment, job creation, technological innovation based event with the president, where we can show we're advancing this priority for America, and also our businesses are going to do great. You'd have never seen events like that during the last administration. You just wouldn't. That wasn't their approach. Mark Andreessen talked at length about this, where he said they wanted it to be highly regulated. They wanted to pick a few winners that they could control and just contain it because they're so worried about the risks. This is creating market-based competition in a very positive way. So, the future is bright, and I think we're in a moment right now that where wet blankets are not going to succeed. It may not always be that way, but it is that way now and for the foreseeable future. And President Trump played a big role in that paradigm shift.
And you talked about earlier about your levels of optimism, and typically I'm frankly pretty cynical a lot of times about Washington and policies. But it's just even through this conversation, it's been very encouraging, and I feel that optimism, and we're going to keep the good times rolling. This next topic is we draw it from a frequent Substack that we follow here on the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod, which is Anthony Pompliano's Substack. He had a great article entitled "Data Shows the Good Times Are Rolling," and in the article he referenced another commentator, someone called Charlie Bilello, who posted two amazing charts that showed just how good the times are. So the first chart is captioned by a tweet: "The S&P 500 closed at another all-time high, its 10th of the year," which is amazing. But for me, it was the second chart that we'll put up here, which really struck me. And it shows each time the NASDAQ hit 1,000-point milestone. So the NASDAQ was at 1,000 almost 30 years ago to the day. It started to grow slowly over the next 20 years or so. I actually remember watching the nightly news when it hit 6,000, because as you can see in the chart, it was between 5 and 6,000 for over 17 years. So that was big news. And then the NASDAQ just went absurd over the last like 7 or 8 years. It's ticking off 1,000-point milestones right and left, sometimes multiple times in 1 year. And now it sits at a record 21,000. So as we, kind of talked about, there's all the doom and gloom, tariffs, trade deals, political infighting, Colbert's getting fired, and all this stuff. But why is the market so strong right now?
Well, because I think the shackles have been taken off. There's tax certainty with the big beautiful bill. There's 100% expensing extended from the first Trump tax cuts, which is encouraging a tremendous amount of investment. That's on the sort of the financing side. Things are looking good. Now, lower interest rates would be even more helpful on that side of things, but they're still going pretty well. The tariff, the threats or the imposed tariffs have been followed up by very serious negotiations and series of trade deals, adding more kind of certainty and optimism on the investment side. On the growth side, and what's going to come out of this, people are starting to understand just how big a moment we are in. So numerous analysts have put out reports showing that AI in particular is going to make things so much more efficient that you're going to gain like 40% more productivity per employee. So GDP per capita is going to go way up. And that is across industries, whether it's healthcare, whether it's manufacturing, white collar to blue collar. It's even going to make lawyers more efficient, if you can believe that. So it's going to generate so much more per capita GDP that people are finally starting to price that in. I actually think they're still underpricing it. I think there's a lot more growth to come, but I think people are starting to understand it, and that's why we're seeing such strong growth. There may be some blips along the way, some corrections, but I think we're in for a really great run over the next number of years.
Well, and on that note, another aspect of the economy is the housing market, influenced in part by, as you said, interest rates. Thankfully, we got into our house before the hike went up, so we're about half of where we're at right now. But we're learning this week that J.P. Morgan is possibly exploring plans to offer loans backed by their clients' cryptocurrency holdings, which include Bitcoin. And this comes on the heels of the announcement that we discussed about a month or so ago around the time of the Bitcoin Policy Summit, where Fannie and Freddie regulators said that they must count crypto holdings as an asset for mortgage applications. And so this article that we'll put up on the screen, it doesn't say what kind of loans or products. JP Morgan isn't commenting on it. Jamie Dimon is, quote, not a fan of Bitcoin. But with all of those headwinds, if this is true, what is the impact of this kind of shift in the lending space?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's going to create a more reality-based credit market. This idea that somebody could be a Bitcoin whale worth millions or billions of dollars, but not be able to get a mortgage because that wealth doesn't count. I mean, that is completely ridiculous. I'm sure JP Morgan feels like they're being dragged into this kicking and screaming given the CEO's comments. But to another, I guess to cite our friend Pomp again, Bitcoin is a phenomenon because it doesn't care if you are Republican or Democrat or black or white or Asian or Hispanic or anything else. It doesn't care if you are risk on or risk averse. It's going to keep marching up because the demand is outpacing the supply. And like Pomp says, if you can't beat it, you have to buy it. So this notion of Bitcoin becoming the new hurdle rate of if you don't have an investment idea that's good enough to outpace the growth in value of Bitcoin, then you have to just buy Bitcoin in order to keep pace with other much more forward-leaning investors. So I think that's the stage that JP Morgan is in. They realize they can't beat it, so they have to buy it in the form of loan collateral. They're competing for customers for credit. And if other competitors, I mean, the Fannie and Freddie announcement, I think, was the starter's pistol. If other competitors are going to be recognizing these assets, they're going to have to recognize them too, and they're going to be left in the dust. Of course, I guess one footnote on this is that while Jamie Dimon has been trash talking Bitcoin for years, he's also developed the biggest digital asset team on Wall Street. So watch what he does and less what he says. But now, even though they didn't comment for the article, but it looks like that's just another example of watch what they do, not what they say. The economic reality is this path is unavoidable. People are going to have to recognize wealth where it exists, not where they wish it existed. So great development, more progress, keep it coming.
Yes, absolutely. Well, for our final substantive segment, we'll switch over to a topic that we've talked about before. It's Bitcoin tax issues. And earlier this month, the folks at Bitcoin Magazine were kind enough to publish an article that I wrote about Bitcoin tax issues, which the NASDAQ picked up as well. The headline the title is Bitcoin is a Commodity, Why Congress Must Fix Bitcoin Taxes. And so it's pretty much me ripping off everything that you've been saying on this issue for the last year or two. But I'd encourage the audience to go check out that article because it is a good overview of some of the tax issues that we talk about here often. And we tried to make it relatable from the perspective of a everyday hardworking American farmer, my grandpa. And so the article was published during Crypto Week. It was the same day as the House Ways and Means hearing on digital assets. Brian talked about that hearing in last week's episode. So go back on your podcast player to listen to that discussion. But Brian, as Congress heads into an extended summer recess, well, the House left early and the Senate's maybe staying a bit, but regardless, as they head into an extended summer recess, what is the latest on the Bitcoin tax fix issues?
So Senator Lummis introduced legislative text and asked for feedback during the Big Beautiful Bill negotiations. It ultimately did not get into that process, but the discussion did start in earnest. And I think the amount of industry feedback and the number of enthusiastic Bitcoiners that spoke up about it caught the House Ways and Means chairman, caught his attention, Chairman Jason Smith. And so he held a hearing about these digital asset tax issues, a potential tax reform package that now Congressman Max Miller, who I know, he's a good guy. We worked at the White House together. He plans to introduce the House version of a digital asset tax reform package. And a couple of the issues that we care about. Now, there's a number of issues in there, probably 6 or 7. A couple of the ones Bitcoiners will care a lot about. One is mined Bitcoin being treated as a commodity, which you wrote about very well in your op-ed and which we've discussed in the past, so that it's taxed when you sell it, not when you mine it. And another is a de minimis exemption for transactions. If you're buying something with Bitcoin, you don't have a capital gains taxable event and a whole bunch of accounting overhead that really prevents people from using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. So we expect provisions on those issues to be included in the Miller bill, and perhaps maybe a little bit different way of looking at it than Senator Lummis's bill. But I'm glad to see that each chamber on the Hill now has some legislative text to work on, and there are a number of vehicles that this could be put into. There's been discussion of another reconciliation package later this year. I just talked to somebody at the White House who said that they are really interested in pursuing that, and that would be a perfect vehicle for this. There are prior versions of market structure legislation that had a tax title in them. So there's, I would say, not a high probability, but a possibility of putting a tax title into a market structure bill. And then, there will be numerous other vehicles that move on a very regular basis, like the NDAA or the Farm Bill, or, a lot of these bills that Congress has to do routinely, and then often have other legislation just lumped in with them. So there are a number of bills where this could move. I think the most talked about vehicle as we sit here today is this other reconciliation package. The speaker has talked about resolving some of the bird bath issues with some things that landed on the cutting room floor and didn't make it into the big, beautiful bill. And so I think if they're able to work that out, I think this is probably the highest likelihood of the options that I mentioned is this subsequent reconciliation bill that really takes another bite of the apple and addresses some of the issues that didn't quite make it into the big, beautiful bill. Whether there's appetite for that was a pretty arduous process. I hope there is an appetite for it. It'll take presidential leadership to get it done. The president seems interested in that. There was a question at the White House briefing from our friend Frank at Bitcoin Magazine, and our friend Caroline Levitt answered it and said the president does support this de minimis exemption. So perhaps that's a positive signal that there's more to come. But very glad to see both chambers talking about it and a few possible legislative vehicles for it. We also have a digital asset report coming out of the White House Wednesday, July 30th, and perhaps there will be some administrative action on that. I think the mining rewards issue could be addressed administratively. We'd love to see it legislatively. Whether that happens by the administration or not, we still want to see it codified into law. But this is a very hot issue, very active on it, and a lot of possibilities for getting it done. So a lot of optimism coming out of the Hill and the administration.
It's on the radar of the right people in the right committees. It's got good champions. Congressman Miller, as you mentioned, he was on a panel at the Bitcoin Policy Summit with my good friend Zach Nunn, who we served together in the state Senate before he got elected to Congress. So good policy, lots of different vehicles. It's in front of the right people. It's got presidential leadership. We'll give it the time that it needs, but hopefully we will see some movement here soon, and possibly even, as you said, as soon as next Wednesday with this report. Transitioning over then to our real final segment, we'll end in the traditional way with the grab bag segment. And this is something I never thought I would discuss, but I'm going to talk about the Emmys. So I never watched these award shows. I don't plan on watching them this year. And usually for me, if a show or a movie gets an award nomination, I almost intentionally avoid it, almost out of spite. It's like my version of being countercultural. But so they announced the Emmy nominees last week. And for whatever reason, I read the list. And what's even weirder is I actually watched some of the shows that were nominated. There's a lot of the big shows that I don't watch. I'll get around to them in 10 years, but things like Severance and Studio, The Pit, The Last of Us, The Penguin, people are talking all about them. I haven't seen them yet, but I'm a big White Lotus fan. Mike White, he's an old Survivor guy. He's actually going back to the Survivor 50th anniversary. They're having a big season there coming up. White Lotus got tons of
50 years old.
Well, 50 seasons. It's 25,
Oh, got it.
25 years old. Yeah, 50 seasons. Sorry, but Jeff Probst is apparently not aging, but it's still going strong. I watched the Conan O'Brien Mark Twain award show. It was hilarious. It was a little bit political and petty at times, but I'm still a huge Conan fan. Nate Bargatze's special was nominated. You know, as I mentioned, we love Survivor. There's a show called Paradise, which was kind of fun. It had sort of Lost vibes to it. Only Murders in the Building is great. But the one that really stood out to me was a Netflix movie that I would have not watched, but for seeing this list, it was called Nona's. And so it's a Vince Vaughn movie based on a true story about a guy who opens an Italian restaurant on Staten Island, and grandmas are the chefs. And so this is a real restaurant that's been open for 15 years on Staten Island. The movie, it was just a really good, wholesome movie. I felt good after watching it. And it's like you said, you know, in your grab bag segment last week when you were talking about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the world is too serious. And what we talk about here is often so serious. And sometimes we just need to laugh or smile. And I did that watching Nona's.
That's great. And I watched Nona's and I loved Nona's. And it reminds me of a good friend who's trying to create a sort of a newer version of Tony and Tina's Wedding. Um, but this is someone who lost someone dear to them in 9/11, and they want to make a play about like a big, mostly Italian family that comes together uh, and gets through tough times. And so Nona's made me think of that, and I watched it as well, and I loved it. I spent a lot of time. I lived in New York for 10 years, so I know a lot of similar families, and I thought it was fantastic. My grab bag item is related but different. So I read this week an article that Founders Films, which is backed by some Palantir executives, the defense tech company, well, actually all tech company. I think Riot uses Palantir actually for a number of things, but some of their executives are raising funds now for Founders Films, which will say yes to projects about American exceptionalism, name America's enemies, back artists unconditionally, and take risk on novel IP. In part of this announcement, they talk about how the American brand is broken, Hollywood is AWOL, movies are too ideological, cautious, less entertaining. I agree with all of that. And they harken back to, you know, the nostalgia of the 80s when you had Red Dawn, Top Gun, Rocky IV, Hunt for Red October, some of the movies that they cite in this announcement, and describe them as pump up material of peak America. They were awesome. And I think we need more of that. So I had a great conversation with our boss Jason, and we had talked about like what does the future hold for each of us, and I had said, look, if we are hugely successful over the next number of years, and we can all just retire and do anything we want, and we don't have to worry about getting paid for it, what I would do is produce that. I would produce pro America, pro strength, pro family, uh, unapologetically funny and off color and politically incorrect content, because politics flows downhill from culture. And I've done politics for a long time at a high level. I would like to move upstream to culture and help bring back that sense of strength, optimism, sense of humor, the things that I get nostalgic about thinking about the 80s growing up. So I love that they're doing this. I think I need to get in touch with these people and try to help them, because this would be like my passion project. I'm so glad to see it. And I hope they're successful. And I hope we get more Top Guns and Ghostbusters, and like original Ghostbusters, not the stupid politically correct knockoffs. Like, I want more of this. Bring me more. Old school Wedding Crashers, Dumb and Dumber, like dumb off-color humor. Like I want all of it, and I want to be a part of it. So I really loved to see this article, and it made me happy. So that's my grab bag item for the day. So I think we are about at our conclusion for this episode of the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, follow me on X at Morgenstern NJ. Follow the pod on Rumble, YouTube, Apple, Spotify. And we will see you next time for another episode of the Peer-to-Peer Policy Pod. Thanks, everybody.